Okay, so chapter 7 talks about organizations and specifically something called a flexible organization. But in order for it to be flexible, you sort of need to understand what it is and how it's structured and thus how it could be flexible. So there's quite a number of objectives here to review in short. So basically, all of you work for some type of organization, or you might even belong to a particular organization. And an organization basically is a group of people, two or more, it says, that are working together to achieve a common goal. Okay. And so, in normal speak, it could be anything from a small business to a very large corporation. But organizations are not specific to just for-profit organizations. You can also look at every nonprofit as a different organization and a different set of goals. Um, and so it's a broad term, literally. Your book kind of narrows it down to more specific to business. And as such, as organizations, they need to show exactly um, how is the organization actually organized? I know it's kind of a play on words there a little bit, but basically speaking, there is something called an organizational chart, which is a diagram that shows you the positions in an organization, usually from the top down, and the relationships within that organization. When you are doing and looking at an organizational chart, which we will quite shortly, you will see what's called a chain of command. Okay. And very much like a military organization has a chain of command, uh, you know, certainly business organizations have chains of command. And what we're really talking about is sort of a line of authority. It usually follows strictly management types of positions, from the highest to lowest level. Okay. It can be quite long, it can be quite short. It sort of depends on the size of the organization. Um, it can be quite tall, meaning there's lots of chains, lots of layers there, or it can be quite flat, not that many. So it really sort of depends on the organization. They actually have a lot of choices that they can make. Okay. So here are examples of an organizational chart here. Um, and this shows at the very top here, you've got the president's position with a few advisors, legal and public affairs are part of that. And then oftentimes the president of the organization has sort of his or her own sort of cabinet, top members of the organization that meet on a regular basis. So they tend to be, the vice presidents or executive vice presidents of various um, divisions or departments, sometimes including folks that are head of HR, head of finance, things like this are all part of a broader upper management. But as you see, even within, in this case, this person is the vice president of operations. It actually comes down to a couple of plant managers that report to the vice president of operation. And each of these plant managers have departments to run. Okay, so each of the plant managers have departmental managers, and those departments have supervisors, which are also part of management. So as you see, it can be quite tedious to sort of map all this type of stuff out. But basically, all this shows is basically a chain of command. This supervisor reports to this department manager, which reports to this plant manager, who reports to this vice president of operations, who reports up to the president. And so, in essence, this becomes the quote unquote chain of command within an organization. They sort of all kind of know their place. But also to go back to our last chapter in management, they all have very different types of views of carrying out plans, from very, very big picture plans at the very top, where we're going to be in the next 5, 10 years, to very operational type of plans of what do we need to get done today, this week, this month, this quarter, to things that are sort of in the middle. So yes, there's definitely a chain of command for sure. This is how organizations are structured. So you're actually looking at a structure here of what an organization looks like, and all organizations have them. They all have them. Okay. Obviously, if the organization is quite small, it might not have, certainly it's not going to have as many um, boxes to sort of fill out, so to speak, on the chart. There will be a smaller organization with a smaller organizational chart. But it is important to sort of understand what the positions are and what the relationships are within that organization. So everyone knows how it's functioning and how it's supposed to function. It's important to know how to get things done, and in order to get things done properly, you have to know who to go to, and who to talk with. Um, and so, respecting and knowing that chain of command within the organizational chart is extremely important. However, we live in a time where we have exceptionally huge global corporations. These organizations are immensely big. They're immensely complicated. They do lots of different things. And so they will have extremely detailed organizational charts that will sometimes make your eyes pop out of your head when you look at it. Like, what? But it is sort of amazing that even they, and it's probably more important for them to have a very, very good structure, so they understand how that organization is best to function. Okay. The purpose of the organizational chart is to make sure the organization can function. And so these structures become really, really important to figure out. Okay. One of the things that you have to understand is that one of the most important tasks that all organizations need to do is design jobs. Okay. And this basically means looking at all the stuff that has to get done, all the tasks that have to get done, all the business activities that have to get done to accomplish the firm. And then you structure those tasks and activities into specific jobs. That's basically what job design is. So look at all the work that has to get done, and you're building through the tasks and activities. You're sort of building specific jobs. Well, we need somebody or some buddies, a group, to do this. We need somebody or some buddies to do this, task and these activities, blah, blah, blah. And thus, once you break it down that way, then you can actually see even more clearly, how many people you might need and what those folks need to do in terms of specific tasks and specific activities and who's responsible for what. Again, it's all about being productive. The purpose of work, the purpose of these organizations is to get stuff done. To accomplish their goals, they got to do work, which means they have to be productive. And so structuring all these jobs, understanding how everything should be designed, is part of making sure things get done. So the goals can be reached. So job design is really a big job, because you have to look at the very, very big picture and look at every single task and activity and see if you can organize that. So it's really cool. And we're going to talk about more about these types of issues in the HR chapters coming up, human resources. Well, once you actually do that, what you need to do then uh, is then separate all of these types of things into a group of distinctive tasks that can be done uh, by different people. And this is the idea of job specialization, right? So we need um, a distinctive task might be something financial, or it might be something in manufacturing. And so you sort of have to separate these types of things to make sure you know all the specializations that you need, right? And that's because sometimes, when an organization does too much and doesn't have this type, um, sometimes jobs can be much too big for one person to handle, right? So how are they handling that, right? Well, they might need to look at the job design, go back to that previous slide, and then they need to say, okay, we need a specialist to do this, and we need a specialist to do that, because that job is too large for any one person to handle. Actually, you need more than one in some cases. So that's a big part of it. Another part of it is, do you need someone who is quite educated and skilled in a specific tasks to do certain things quickly and more efficiently and get things done? And so that's why some jobs come with very specific types of qualifications. You need to have so many years doing job X. You need to have a certification in this software, or a degree in this field, or experience with this, or experience with that. um, that's where the specialization comes in. Not anyone can come in and do that particular job. We need someone who is very specialized in a particular task, in a particular area, to get that job done. And so this is part of that. Sometimes you can break work into such specialties that a worker is just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Um, and a couple of things happen. First, they get much better at it, because if you're only kind of specializing in one area, you can actually do more of it. You get better at it over time. Unfortunately, the negative part of that is a lot of people sort of get bored, doing the same thing over and over again. And they sort of need a little bit of variety. So that's the challenge. You want to make sure people are specialized enough to get the work done, but not so bored where they're gonna keep quitting, and you need to keep rehiring people to do the same thing over and over again. Um, Again, productivity is the key. If you have specialized equipment, you're going to need people who are specialists in that particular equipment, whether that's computer-aided manufacturing, or computer-aided design, or accounting software, or driving certain tractors, trailers, other types of things. If it's a specialized piece of equipment that needs a specialist, then that's part of that uh, task as well. That's part of it as well. And if you have jobs that are specialized in a particular area, then you can actually get very specific job training. So you're getting more bang for the buck for training somebody to get something done. Okay. So that is a plus. It's easier to train a group of people doing one or two things than it is to train people doing thousands of different things or hundreds of different things, because it's just too general. It never gets specific enough to make them do it. Well, again, companies know that if you're doing tasks and you're so specialized that you're doing one thing over and over again, that you might leave, or you might get too bored. A lot of companies have something called a job rotation. And that means they have, within the system, they shift employees from one job to another, obviously in very similar types of work that can get done, but in a way that reduces the boredom quite substantially, and keeps people working and productive. And so it does end up helping workers stay interested in the job. They're developing new skills and they're really kind of understanding the new roles that they might want to focus on. So I don't know if any of you have been in a company that systematically shifts employees from one job to another um, over the course of a week. And maybe that's, if you work at a large supermarket, perhaps you'll be cashiering one day, bagging the other day, and customer service the other day, and stocking shelves another day. That's a type of rotation where you're always doing some different things. Um, and so the likelihood of you getting too bored with one thing is significantly lower, and they'll be able to keep you on the job longer. You can also, there's a lot of people that actually want more more stuff to do. In essence, they can do more than what the task at hand is. So that's sort of a job enlargement type of thing, um, as well as something called job enrichment. Okay. Okay, so how are organizations organized? Well, one of the um, one of the wonderful things about organizations is they tend to have what they call departmentalization. So they end up grouping jobs by what they call a department. And that's because it's just a lot easier to manage if you are grouping people in similar areas. So what areas or common bases that they organize people in? What type of departments? Well, they can departmentalize by function. And so this is the marketing department. This is the finance department. That's by function. What type of job are they doing? They could department by product. Um, this is the department that deals with uh, um, I can't think of any products right now. This is the department that deals with product X, and this is the department that deals with product Y. And so they basically function by department. I'm drawing a blank. I don't know why I did that. It doesn't happen often. They can also departmentize by location, and so you can have a North American, if it's a global company, a North American, a European uh, department, an Asian department, or something like this. Or within the country, you can have a Northeast, a Southern, Western type of location. You can also um, departmentalized by customer. Okay, so we're going to be looking at all of these. All right, so enough by memory. It's actually right on my slides here, so that's good. So by function here, again, like I was telling you, all the marketing folks are in the marketing department. All folks that are working on the production line are in the production department. All the folks that are in the accounting personnel are in the accounting department, et cetera. So that's by function. That's by function. And most businesses actually seem to feel comfortable organizing by function. Of course, there's problems when you do that because is the marketing department talking to the production department, and is the marketing department and the production department talking to the finance department? So there are some problems with that way of organizing, but it is a very common way. Here we go, by product. Okay, so grouping to a particular product or service. So for example, and I'll go on the line here, when you call um,
Kellogg's.
I'm sorry.
Kellogg's, because they have the Eggo waffles section and they have the cereal section and all that.
Okay. Yeah, that could be an example. I was thinking of actually when if you call, Verizon or Charter, which I think is Optimum now, they will say, okay, are you calling about internet service? And you press one, and you go to that particular area because that's the product that they're specializing by? Or are you calling about television service, and that was another product, and so they might specialize by product in that regard. Again, it is easier, but again, it does end up causing some duplication, you know, and it becomes a product by product competition rather than it's the whole organization that's really at stake. By location, I seem to have remembered that one. Okay, so you can departmentalize based on whole countries or regions within a country, and so again, there are unique demands at different locations. But again, it's a very large administrative staff, and so it costs a lot of money to organize this way. And by customer here, we're grouping according to the needs of specific customer populations. So it allows folks to deal with unique customers or unique customer groups in providing them with the type of services that they need. But again, it is a very large staff that requirement, which drives up the costs. A lot of companies are doing combinations. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So, for example, Toyota has a product division, has product divisions. So they organize by, cars, trucks, etc. Such as R&D and engineering, compact car company, mid-sized car company, commercial vehicles, Lexus, powertrain, and connected, as well as having divisions in those locations. So they have a combination of both product and it seems like there's some function or location. Sorry, my location. So in this case here, this is a company, New Wave Fashions. As you see, they're broken up by men's clothing, women's clothing, and children's clothing. But then the marketing function is then broken up by region. And then the operations function is actually broken up. The operations department is actually broken up by functioning. So in this case, it's a multi-base use. This is by function, this is by region, this is by product. All right, so this leads to the issue of delegation within the work. Managers need to delegate work and make sure everything is working out okay. Well, there's different ways in which that could be delegated, and it depends, technically speaking, on whether everything in an organization is basically top down, which we usually call centralized authority, or it's somewhat bottom up. Employees actually have quite a free range to help make those decisions to get things done. That's decentralized. Of course, there's pluses and minuses with both systems, but in either way, it's how does work and power is shared. In an organization is what delegation is really about. So in order to delegate successfully, one of the first things you got to do is make sure everyone knows who's responsible for what. Okay, so responsibility is very, very important. And then the business organization has to grant authority, the power to actually get that job done to the people they're assigning or making responsible for it. And then the last thing is making sure that if any mistakes are happening, that there's accountability. There's accountability at stake. So you can actually go back, well, you had the authority to do this. Why didn't you do it? You had the responsibility to do this. Why didn't you do it? That's sort of the accountability issue that's in play. Okay, and this is a little graphic about it. Well, for a number of different reasons, managers are often sort of unwilling to delegate work. Okay, to their employees. And so they want to keep the power. They want to do all of that themselves. Why does that happen? Well, trust is a big one. If you can't trust your employees to get the job done, it's hard to trust them with that responsibility, that authority, um, to do it. So managers, these types of managers are sort of unwilling to do that because they don't trust that. Another issue is fear. Of course, that does play into the trust issue as well. But what if the employees perform better than they expected, and other people in the organization notice that they performed well? Well, that employee might become the next manager, right, or become the next, um, have higher levels of authority. And so some managers fear that, in essence, they'll be outperformed, by their employees, outshone by their employees, where managers want to take the credit for when things go well. It's hard to do that if then the employee can show they did it on their own because they had the power to do that. Managers may be, even though they're managers, doesn't mean they're organized. Um, they might be not able to plan very well, and thus they simply don't have they don't have the ability to sort of delegate certain things because they're so disorganized, and they don't have a plan, and so everything sort of gets stopped right there. So an organization that's decentralized basically spreads the management authority widely around the organization. So everyone in the organization, from the lower level employees all the way up, have been delegated a certain amount of power to get things done. So if you're ever at a store and you want to buy a product, but it might be a little damaged, and you'll ask the cashier, "Hey, this is damaged. Can you give me a discount?" They might be automatically given the authority to provide everybody with a damaged product that they see for themselves, a 10% discount on everything. If it's something that's more than that, they might need to call a manager. They don't have the authority to do anything more than, say, 10% discount. So if the customer says, "Well, this is really badly damaged, I want 25% off," they're going to have to, then they don't have the authority to do that. So they'll go to the next level and say, "Well, let me get a manager here because I only can authorize up to 10% discount." So that's another way that you can decentralize, but still have limits. Still have limits. Some organizations are very, very top down. The authority is concentrated at the upper level, and that's it. Okay, it's very, very top down. Your book gives you your example of UPS, and I did a faculty externship at UPS back in 2002, I believe it was the time, and that's when faculty members, about internships as students, you get an internship by working for a company. A faculty externship is when a faculty member is granted that same type of thing with a company. And I did an externship with UPS when I was in Massachusetts, and they are very, very top down. They are very quite structured, um, very much like the Army, or any type of military unit, very top down. But they do promote from within. They do have other types of policies that help it make it easier to accept that it is a top-down business. Like, you're not getting ordered from someone who's never done the job before. They've actually performed their job well to get promoted, and so that's how they feel. They feel the best way to manage that authority is to keep it at the top of levels of the organization. And of course, because the organization at the top are folks that have already been at the bottom and worked their way up, they feel that's a pretty good system for them. So your book goes through various factors that influence, how much can a company or an organization really decentralize? Can you really trust, um, you know, everybody to make those decisions properly for the business? And so there's a number of different factors that your book sort of goes through itself. A big part of it is, the nature of the decision. I mean, if it's going to have a huge impact financially, you can't just trust anybody to do that. You might ask them to have input on it or what they might think, but that's different than giving them the actual ability to make the decision on something. So the tradition has been more top down with limited amount of authority for folks at the lower levels, including the lower level managers. So it really sort of depends, and your book kind of goes through a few scenarios there for you. Another thing that's talked about, we used to just call it the span of control, but again, if you're writing a book, you might as well get something done differently, so they call it a span of management. But either way, it's really about the number of workers who report to you as a manager. And so you have a wide span if you have a very large number of people who are reporting to you. That's a wide span of management. You have a narrow span of management when you only have a few folks that are reporting to you. And the idea behind this is if you have a wide span of control, you would have a wide influence. If you have a narrow span of control, you would have a more narrow influence on what's going on. And that's a nice little figure that gives you the wide span and the narrow span. Okay. Oh, and then they also mentioned two things that you need to know as well. One is called a flat organization, which basically is, in this case, there's not a lot of levels here. The organization is relatively flat because there's someone up here and then everybody else is sort of piled on here. So it's a flat organization. It's not a lot of organizational structure to it. It's more flat. This one is called a tall organization, as you saw in the other charts, because there's multiple layers, and I'm sure they go beyond this too on the bottom. So that's different between tall and a flat organization. And again, that's part of what they call organizational height. So a flat organization does not have much height, right? Because there's not a lot of layers of management in the firm. Other organizations have lots of layers of management, and those are tall. Okay, so again, your book kind of asks you to recognize those differences. And then, of course, there are some forms of structure in organizations that are listed here. Line and staff, matrix, and network. So we're going to look at those next. So what you saw in that organizational chart before is basically a line structure. So the chain of command goes directly from person to person through that line. You can actually draw a straight line to follow the levels of management from the very, very top to the very, very bottom. And that's traditionally how your organizational structure is done in a line. So that means line managers are folks who are in that position that makes those decisions and gives orders to everybody who's below them on that line chart, okay, on that line structure. And so again, there's advantages and disadvantages to everything and every system. There's no perfect system because we're human. We simply cannot develop a perfect system. But systems that we do have, we have to look at is what the advantages and disadvantages are. And then the line system, you can make decisions more quickly and thus get certain things done. Of course, the disadvantage is there are a lot of things that you're looking at, and there's more room for error, when that structure is there. Line structures are not effective if the bigger the company gets, the less effective line managers become. Okay. And that's because they have a more narrow span of control. A line and staff structure utilizes that chain of command that we looked at with the assistance of staff managers. Okay, so staff managers support, advise, and provide expertise within an organization to get certain things done. Okay, so here you have your line positions of the president and the vice president of marketing, the vice president of finance. But you have the assistance of your staff managers whether that's legal services or public affairs or human resources or whatnot. This is one of those types of things that they're talking about with line and staff. Okay. Of course, within line and staff, there's a lot of conflict. More people are involved in various things, and so there's conflict. So the important thing for organizations to do is what I think what we have to do a lot more of is discuss the advantages and disadvantages of certain decisions we want to make and how it's going to impact an organization. And then for the president or the folks that are really in charge to pick the one that's going to benefit the most and do the least, in terms of disadvantage. A matrix structure is a combo. It has vertical lines of authority as well as horizontal lines of authority, and so that makes it very interesting because you could have more than one manager based on what your job is. So it's a different type of departmentalization that creates this structure. Okay. There's also something called a cross-functional team, and these individuals are a team, but they come from different specialties and they have different skills. So you might have someone from finance working with someone from marketing, working with someone from production, and someone from engineering, all on the same cross-functional team. Obviously, they all have varying specialties and expertise, but the team is put together in that particular way. Okay, on purpose, because it's important to see all angles. And like I said, here's the matrix structure showing that you do have traditional departmentalization, engineering, production, finance, and marketing. But when projects are done, particularly with those cross teams that I was mentioning, your project manager is going to have people from all of these departments to get the project done. Okay. And so in essence, the folks in these departments literally have two managers. They report to a manager that they have in a line, and they report to a manager of the project. And that's what I meant by the two manager piece. Okay. And of course, like anything, there's advantages and disadvantages, and that I can talked about a little bit already. And something. The network structure is for virtual a virtual organization, very few permanent employees, and many part-time, many consigned gig workers, as they say, that are involved, temporary workers. Lots of flexibility, but not a lot of control or commitment from folks that you're working with. So Uber sort of has this type of a structure. Amazon has a part of their structure that's network, because a lot of the folks who deliver for Amazon, particularly around the holidays, which you're going to be seeing, are folks that actually are driving around in their own cars. And things like that. So they're temporary workers, basically. Something called corporate culture is an important piece here that I think I'm going to save until our next class. So in that sense, we'll stop here for today, and we'll finish up chapter 7 next time.